Hey, what's going on everybody? Cryo here, bringing you a dungeon guide for the Halls of Atonement. Today we're going to be taking a look at notable trash mobs and some dangerous abilities to be on the lookout for, while also checking out some boss mechanics. Of course, this is still beta and things may change. Should things change too drastically, I will be updating the guide when I do my prideful Mythic Plus pull-by-pull series come Season 1. As always, smash that subscribe button and let's get it. On your way to the first boss, you will encounter Depraved Darkblade. These have one major ability, Dark Thrust, a highly telegraphed frontal attack that should be sidestepped. Depraved Houndmasters. These casters will alternate between shoot and rapid fire on random targets. Rapid fire, the more deadly of the two, is a volley of arrows that should be sidestepped out of. You will likely want to deal with these first due to their third ability, Loyal Beasts. More on that in just a second. Vicious Gargon. Let's face it, everyone is just going to call these dogs, especially when they're controlled by Houndmasters. These unfriendly canines cast Jagged Swipe, a bleed dot that lasts for 8 seconds and stacks. When enraged by the Depraved Houndmaster's Loyal Beast cast, these doggos will grow in size while their damage is increased by 125% for 20 seconds. In other words, it's best to kite. Depraved Obliterator. This caster will mainly cast Wicked Bolt, a general spellcast that should be interrupted to limit the incoming damage. They will also apply Curse of Obliteration to a random member. After 6 seconds, anyone within 8 yards of the primary target will also be afflicted by the curse. Toiling Groundskeeper. These deal a surprisingly decent amount of physical damage through basic attacks such as Smack and Bonk. When involved with massive pulls, the damage can sneak up on you, but Groundkeepers have smaller health pools and should topple over quickly. Depraved Collector. Aside from the Depraved Houndmasters, these are the most important mobs to pay attention to. They will cast Collect Sin, a channeled ability that pulses AoE damage while summoning animated sin adds. This can get overwhelming and should be interrupted as soon as possible. Siphon Life should also be interrupted, as it will heal the Collector for a decent amount of the damage dealt, but is a lower priority in comparison to Collect Sin. Shard of Halkias. You will need to defeat 3 of these shards to activate the first boss. The most notable ability to be on the lookout for is Sin Quake. The shard will cause eruptions to spawn and quickly explode, dealing massive physical damage to anyone stood within them. The shard will also cast Thrash, however this is unavoidable AoE damage. Throughout the first part, you will come across these loyal Stoneborns. You can avoid most of them. Should you choose to engage, tanks should pick them up immediately, as they do have a frontal cone ability, Stone Breath. Other than manageable physical damage, the loyal Stoneborn will grant all other mobs Stoneborn Boon, reducing the damage they take by 10%. If you are a member of the Venthyr Covenant, you may use your extra action button when in range to compel the Stoneborn to fight for you instead. The first boss, Halkias the Sin-Stained Goliath. To start, only on Mythic will you see the Light of Atonement, or the Red Circle Aura. This is what protects you from Sin Light Visions, a fear that is cast on random players, so be sure to always be inside it. Healers can and should dispel the fear ASAP should one go off, as you do not want your friends running off and pulling more mobs by accident. On normal and heroic difficulties, this will happen, as there is no Light of Atonement to protect the group. For tanks, positioning is key for this encounter. Periodically he will cast Crumbling Slam, leaving behind glass shards directly in front of him. Do not stand in them. Similar to this, he will cast Heave Debris, essentially throwing a pool of glass shards at a random player. His main big boy ability is Refracted Light. The Goliath will shoot beams of refracted Sinlight in 4 cardinal directions while rotating. Beware, he can change directions mid-rotation. Tanks, this is why positioning is extremely important. Due to the nature of refracted light, you want to allow your party ample room to rotate without having to walk over the glass shards. Luckily, it does seem the timers line up to where he casts Crumbling Slam, Heave Debris, Crumbling Slam, and a final Heave Debris before casting Refracted Light. This gives you some heads up on when you should think about repositioning. The TLDRs stand in the red circle, Light of Atonement, to avoid being feared by Sinlight visions, but spread enough to not drop glass shards on each other. Tanks reposition away from said glass shard pools, and everyone dodge refracted light by rotating with the boss while standing in the safe zones. While heading to the second boss, you will encounter Stone Fiend Ankle Biters. These are the toxic swords of Shadowlands. These little guys will leap to random players and literally bite ankles. Their ankle bite will hinder movement speed with a chance to stun for 0.5 seconds and cause players to suffer bleed damage. Simply kill them to remove the debuffs. Stoneborn Eviscerator. This mob will occasionally eviscerating dash towards random players, inflicting physical damage while also applying Stony Veins. This magic debuff can and should be dispelled. However, if it is not and is allowed to reach 10 stacks, the afflicted player's heart instantly turns to stone and they die. Stoneborn Reaver. This mob can also apply the Stony Veins debuff, but his main ability is an interruptible cast called Turn to Stone. Just like it sounds, if this cast is completed, all players within 8 yards will turn to stone for 8 seconds. All friendly mobs affected will take 50% less damage. Stoneborn Slasher. The main ability to look out for these is Powerful Swipe. It is a frontal cleave, however it fixates on the tank, meaning you cannot run out of it, as it will just rotate with you and then potentially cleave your party. The second boss is Echelon. This boss will not activate until the door in his room is opened. The player that opens the door will be knocked back and take minor damage. First things first, Blood Torrent. Sometimes it can be difficult to see, but the boss will leave a pool of toxic blood at the feet of a random party member. Be sure to move out of it. Up next, we have Stone Call. The boss will summon 6 undying Stone Fiends. On Mythic difficulty and higher, the Stone Fiends will continuously cast Villainous Bolt. This cast will cause the adds to stand in place, making it much more difficult for the next few parts. More on that later. These mobs need to be cleaved down, and once they reach 0 HP, they will explode, and they will cast Stone Form, becoming immune to damage and begin to heal back up to full. While the Stone Fiends are regenerating, the party members will be dealing with Curse of Stone. Upon reaching 100 energy, Echelon unleashes a powerful curse, slowing players over 5 seconds and then applying Turn to Stone, stunning players in place. On Mythic difficulty, all players are affected by the curse. Simultaneously, Echelon will target a random player with Stone Shattering Leap. Jumping to them will cause a slam effect that deals massive physical damage but also shatters any undying Stone Fiends in stone form. It is the responsibility of the selected player to position themselves so that the slam will hit as many Stone Fiends as possible. This is why it's imperative to group the Stone Fiends up as close as possible while they're still alive. If you miss the slam, they will be back in play and you will have to deal with not only newly summoned adds, but the old ones as well. This will get overwhelming on higher difficulties. This fight requires everyone to be paying attention to not only themselves, but their party members as well. You will need to know where the Stone Fiends are before the Curse of Stone is applied, as you will only have 5 seconds to get into position should you be targeted by Stone Shattering Leap. On the other hand, should you not be targeted by Stone Shattering Leap, you need to get out of your party member's way as to not get clipped by the slam. Hindsight also tells me that if at all possible, do your best to keep the room clean by standing near edges before Blood Torrent goes off. This will give you more room to deal with the adds and not have to deal with overlapping mechanics. While heading to the third boss, you will only encounter familiar trash mobs, so we will skip them. The third boss, High Adjudicator Aleez, is a fairly easy fight with only a few mechanics. There does not seem to be any differentiating factors between normal, heroic, and mythic difficulty other than abilities hitting harder. First, as the tank, you want to prioritize interrupting Bolt of Power. This is cast on the player with the highest level of threat and deals burst magic damage. As a group, the main ability to interrupt is Volley of Power. Similar to the Bolt, this will deal a burst of magic damage, but at 3 random players. The third cast ability used by Aleez is Anima Fountain. This is a non-interruptible channel that will cause the Anima Fountain to overflow. Impact points are depicted by red swirlies on the ground and should be avoided. Finally, High Adjudicator Aleez will periodically summon ghastly parishioners via Spectral Procession. There were no visual cues to know when this was happening, so a boss timer is highly encouraged. While a ghastly parishioner is out, it will have a haunting fixation, fixating a random player, tank included. The fixated player must stand behind one of the 4 Vessel of Atonements. Bringing a ghastly parishioner to an empty Vessel of Atonement dissipates the parishioner and seals the vessel. You will want to be quick with this because the ghastly parishioner will pulsate damage to everyone until it is sealed. If within 8 yards of the parishioner, you will take even more damage, so if you are not the fixated target, move away. And that just about does it. TLDR, interrupt the boss's 2 cast and kite the ghosts into the 4 containers around the room. This is a soft enrage, as once all 4 Vessels of Atonements are gone, it is unlikely more will spawn and the ghastly parishioner damage will become overwhelming. Before you face off with the last boss, you must first face a mini-boss. Similar to the Shadow of Zul found in King's Rest, here in the Halls of Atonement we are up against Inquisitor Sigar. He will mainly cast Wicked Bolt, a general spell cast that should be interrupted when possible to limit incoming tank damage. You will also notice a hefty amount of tormented souls around the room. These do 0 damage to the party, however occasionally Sigar will cast Dark Communion. This non-interruptible ability channels into tormented souls, healing the Inquisitor, and upon completion turns the souls into manifestations of envy. These manifestations should be scooped up by the tank, but they will periodically cast Mark of Envy, a 15-second fixate on a random player. These can however be stunned and or displaced, meaning death grips, roots, and knockbacks. The Inquisitor will also occasionally cast Dispersed Sin, causing a manifestation of envy to explode, leaving behind a pool of anguish. Do not stand in the anguish. The faster you kill the tormented souls, the less times Inquisitor Sigar can heal himself, and the faster you can move on to the final boss. Lord Chamberlain is the final boss encounter and marks the end of your Halls of Atonement adventure. Lord Chamberlain will afflict his main target, presumably the tank, with Stigma of Pride. This dot will inflict shadow damage every 3 seconds for 18 seconds. The damage will also increase by 30% every tick, so healers need to be ready to pump heals during this, as there should not be any other damage going out. At 70% and 40%, Lord Chamberlain will teleport to the center of the room and begin his combo of Telekinetic Onslaught, Telekinetic Repulsion, and Ritual of Woe. First, Telekinetic Onslaught. Lord Chamberlain will pull all nearby Sinstone statues to him, inflicting physical damage and knocking back any player in the statue's path. Do not be in line with the statues or directly on top of the boss to avoid this damage. Secondly, Telekinetic Repulsion. Lord Chamberlain will repel all nearby Sinstone statues directly away from him, once again inflicting physical damage and knocking back anyone in its path. This is easier to avoid as you can stand between the statues or directly on top of the boss. Lastly, Ritual of Woe. Lord Chamberlain will channel a beam of anima towards all nearby Sinstone statues. This will affect players or the statue, whichever it strikes first. Upon striking a player, shadow damage will be taken every 1 second. Upon striking a statue, all players suffer AoE shadow damage. Therefore, all beams should be soaked by players and personal cooldowns should be used. Tanks and immune classes. You are able to stand close enough to the boss to soak 2 beams at once. This may make it easier to manage. While the boss is not involved in his combos, he will periodically cast Telekinetic Toss, throwing a Sinstone statue at a nearby player, inflicting physical damage, and, you guessed it, knocking back anyone in its path. As of right now, the Sinstone statues will rotate and fly in whichever direction they are facing, making it a bit easier to dodge. Lord Chamberlain will also cast Unleashed Suffering. This is a frontal cone of anima damage that should be sidestepped out of. TLDR, dodge statues, soak beams, and this encounter will be over before you know it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this content, and be sure to comment down below if you want to see the other 7 dungeons. Until next time, stay frosty.